Today on our continuing discussion on first responder mental health, an initiative we're calling When the Smoke Clears, we want to talk about real help that is out there for people in need. We've talked about how mental health and well-being issues are discussed more often, which is a positive thing. Most leaders want their people to be well, and today that includes taking care of themselves and their mental health. We need to break down barriers and stigmas to continue this progress. Today, our focus will be on the programs that are available to help when someone is in need. Gathering the courage to talk about mental health is a huge step, but following through and getting services is the ultimate goal in getting better. There are programs out there that are specific to first responders, and that's a large part in the work that Dr. Bob does in his practice. There are also other general mental health services like 988 that can help a person get their foot in the door and on the road to recovery. Welcome back. Episode 3. We're going to talk a little bit about what programs are out there to help the mental health of first responders. Now, Dr. Bob, in some of our other episodes, we've talked about peer support groups. But for those that may not fully know what they are, let's talk about what is a peer support group, and if we had individuals who are interested in maybe establishing one in their portion of the state, how would they go about doing that?
Okay, well, first of all, peer support is a group, a cadre of firefighters who are trained and have continuing training in things like what plagues us. Alcohol, cancer, PTSD. What are these things? What is therapy? So peer support, in short, it's peer-driven and clinician-guided at its best. So we're addressing not only the stigma, but access to behavioral health services, education, what are behavioral health services, and about what to expect. That's something that our peers do. So we do training and outreach. We promote good behavioral health by emphasizing things like resilience, which is the attitudes, the thoughts, and the behaviors that go along with good mental health. We're a conduit into their EAPs, if they have EAPs. If it's a small volunteer fire department that we're helping, sometimes they don't have those. So we study that a little bit. We're in the fire stations. Most of our interactions are one-on-one and off the cuff, but we're a conduit into the behavioral health system. We're going... It's going on almost all the time in a fire station. A couple of guys will talk about it. What is it? What is our EAP? It still amazes me how many firefighters don't not only know what an employee assistance program is, but really don't know what happens when you go. So I think those are the main components.
So you talk about some of this training. So how would individuals find some of this training, and does it cost money or?
Well, the thing that I'm most proud of our 4 teams in the Metro is that when we have a training, they essentially pay me what I would lose being out of the office for a couple of days. So I come in and do the training, I provide the materials, and if other departments want to come in, we can get 2 or 3 people, we can get extra people. No one in our jurisdictions, including the Plainfield Fire Department, has ever said no. So we have a 2-day training. We have quarterly trainings, and we have the same training 4 times for each of the jurisdictions, and anybody's welcome. So again, I think we've had departments, we've got volunteer departments that have representation that haven't spent a dime. And I think it's important for us to understand we need to help each other. In our job, we have 2 in, 2 out. The Army, you have battle buddies. The Navy, you have shipmates. We need to watch each other.
Yeah. You know, Tony, you know, in addition to the peer support groups, I know you and the union as a whole have done a lot of work around the state and really with helping to educate the General Assembly on this, our state elected officials. You want to talk a little bit about the work you've done there at the State House?
Sure. So we've really in advocating for the, legislation that essentially requires training on suicide prevention, and this is specifically targeted to fire, EMS, and law enforcement. So addressing mandatory education on suicide prevention and also behavioral wellness and what that looks like. You know, sometimes we're in a field, a career that has structure, you know, and sometimes it's not enough just to suggest that you might want to take a look at something. You got to make it a requirement to say, you know what, you need to really invest once a year in this. So the legislation essentially that we got all public safety stakeholder groups advocating for and passed, and the governor signed it into law. So the legislature passed this bill that created this program, and it's in development now. It hasn't actually rolled out yet, but it's in development through the assistance of your office. This will be a mandatory training as we have recruit classes, but then for incumbent firefighters, EMS, and law enforcement every single year. It's important, I think, to understand that we are also, when we work on bills, it's an opportunity for us to educate the 150 members of the Indiana General Assembly about the needs of public safety. And this is certainly a need, that's why we're doing this program. So I think that it's opened the eyes of many people in the legislature to say, okay, this is something, and oftentimes the response was, I didn't know, but it makes sense. It makes sense that you would, you know, need to have this type of education. You know, I think it's important to, when we talk about, you know, that's for active and creating a culture from day one in the Fire Academy on educating on behavioral health matters. But there's a segment of our own community that we miss, and it's the retirees. It's the retired members that so often have had these conversations, and you have to remember, we're involved in changing the culture and destigmatizing this. They were a product of the culture of stigma. You know, their solution was to put themselves in the bottle. Their solution ended up being not getting treatment, ignoring, experiencing failed relationships, but counting, as strange as it may be, counting on the firehouse as their way of coping. But then when they retire, they no longer have the firehouse. They don't have their place in coping. So I think it's important, and I think that there's some easy ways, whether, you know, it's in the fire, you take initiative of the fire department or a local initiative, you know, host a breakfast, call up these retirees and say, you know what, we want you to come in and we just want to talk. We want to hear your stories. We want to tell you stories, and we just want to introduce ourselves. So I think that's something that's really low cost, and oftentimes you can get the food donated.
Retirees breakfast is a great
right.
opportunity
right.
to talk about
That's
this
right.
stuff.
Yeah. Who doesn't like to sit around the table and eat and tell stories?
Yeah. And I think too is, you know, is we can support our career firefighters or volunteer fire, but it's the families too. It's the spouses at home and the children that I think has been a missing component, because we can support them at the firehouse and through different, but I truly believe that our spouses and children need to understand what's happened, how it's happened, because they can get support, but the other times they're at home and trying to rebuild their career and also help them rebuild that family relationship. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, and when I was fire chief, one evening we brought in spouses and significant others, and that was a really eye-opening experience. I mean, to your point, Steve, is I know there were some of the husbands and wives that said, I wish we had had this 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because now I understand my husband or my wife or a little bit better in why they come home, and it takes a day for them to get back to kind of a baseline there. So we definitely need to make sure we're including our family, spouses, significant others in that.
And one of the things that we did at work too was we're very big on having our families come in to our station. At least in my station, I'm the company officer there. We have a lot of firefighters and families having babies right now. And my wife is a saint. I don't know how she did it when I was gone every third day. But now we tell them, like, hey, if your missus or your husband or whatever, if one of your family members, whoever has the baby, needs a break, bring the pack and play. We got 6 babysitters right here. They can go upstairs and take a nap. And they just got to get up if the bell rings. But those kids are my kids. And so it really, that is huge. And I think for a little bit we got away from that. We're starting to get back to it. But, you know, a lot of kids grew up in the firehouses. We have a game room upstairs, you know, that like guys will donate like a foosball table or like an old Xbox, and the kids play on it. We don't play on it, the kids do. And air hockey table, they just have a good time doing that. And that's how I think that we can start to open up a little bit and really see that, you know, the families go through this stuff like I do. Like when I would wake up at night and just sit on the side of the bed just in a sweat from a nightmare or something, my wife wouldn't get it. Now she gets it. And so destigmatizing things like what you guys are talking about, including everybody from retirees to the newest guys to the bosses, is awesome.
And I don't think there's anything that will ever be able to replace the human interaction, right? We have this social media thing, and everybody carries their device. To your point, Troy, I think that we need to make sure that we always keep things and recognize the human factor, and that's communication. Nothing can ever replace that communication, and that's therapy in and of itself. Is just, you know, having people into the firehouse, whether it be family, friends, whatever, outside the firehouse, connecting with the same people that understand, and not be reliant upon, just, living your best life as it is posed on whatever social media platform, and get out of our corners in the firehouse with those devices and make sure that we're talking to each other, because that's irreplaceable, I think. And we also have, I think, we're doing a very good job now of incorporating this into our culture from day one in the fire service, because I think that we need to message to the people that come after us is that we're not going to be able to shield you from every bad thing. You're going to be right in the middle of it. You're not just observing it. You are in it. You are in tragedy. We're not going to be able to shield you for that. But what we can guarantee is that we can provide you tools for resiliency and how to deal with what you were just involved in. And that, you're not alone in that also. And I think that's the point that you're trying to make, that we're all together.
Yep.
And really, we've talked career and volunteer, and it might be a little easier for some of the full-time departments to engage in some of these programs, but how specifically can we target the volunteer fire service, and what are some ways that they can be a part of these programs? Troy?
One of the things that my little volunteer department up in Tipton called Cicero Township Volunteer Fire Department does, the new chief up there just started instituting crew nights where everybody can go out on Saturday nights. They all get together, they have dinner, they have trainings there, the kids do things. And, that costs nothing to have everybody come and say hello and to be a part. That's one example of what somebody on the volunteer side can do.
And Steve, I know we've talked a lot about it within the State Fire Marshal's office, some other programs and things. You want to share a little bit about what you are working on from the State Fire Marshal's office? Yeah,
on our website, dhs.in.gov, if you search behavioral health, there's several resources on the website that people can use to help and to learn. And just, I think one of the things we talked about earlier is the peer support is to take the message to them. And one of the ideas we had is to have peer support speak at their state convention this year, give 10 minutes so we can start introducing that, because we do have 92 counties, we do have 1,000 fire departments. and I want it to be that tool to help get that message out about what is available and start growing this behavioral health program.
You know, I think we've used the word resilient a couple of times, and what, Dr. Bob, kind of specifically, we're thinking about resilience. What are some strategies and tactics for firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics to utilize to be resilient? You know, I think about it may be like a bee sting, right? Where we could be stung a dozen times and never have a reaction. Mm-hmm. But that next bee sting, right? Or that next run is the one that is the moment that we really, it sticks with us. So how can we learn to be more resilient?
Well, good analogy. And I think that our work and the traumas that we encounter are, analogously, like what you described. Everybody's misery is different. But I think resilience is, it's a wide category. There are attitudes, behaviors, techniques. So we're talking about stuff like yoga, meditation. A couple of our peer support teams have that regularly. Yoga for firefighters, meditation for firefighters.
Recovery meetings.
Recovery meetings.
Yes.
Recovery meetings, and they're great. I think, like the way I teach this to peer support, and there's probably 50 other ways to do it, but I use 5 words. Self-care, unplug, finding joy, supportive, and toxic. So self-care is a wide category. When I talk to departments, do training for departments, we talk about vacations, we talk about boats, motorcycles, painting, whatever you do to take care of yourself. Unplugging is simply getting away, getting out of that environment and having a break from it, which is something my generation didn't do. Finding joy. What brings you joy? Kids, grandkids, pets, something you're passionate about. So the supportive and toxic is we want to gravitate toward supportive people in situations. We want to distance ourselves from toxic people in situations. And the metaphor I use is you got to get the lowest dose of that possible. You're not going to avoid it, but you have to get the lowest dose of toxicity possible.
Well, that's going to wrap up the end of our 3rd segment. Join us next time on When the Smoke Clears, when we explore the warning signs of mental health crisis. We hope to equip people with the knowledge to know when there's a problem and the courage to step in and help someone. Until then, thanks for joining us and stay healthy and safe.